Well, good morning. Welcome to Montgomery College here in the lovely state of Maryland. Sunny day, so I'm glad you're here. This is Montgomery College TV. This is the Introduction to Sociology class. My name is Michael DeAndrea, Professor of Sociology. And we're here today to talk about our term paper, our class term paper. But before we get to that, what I wanted to do is talk briefly about the course design, how this course is designed. For Introduction to Sociology, I like to think of it more as an invitation. It sort of has a more welcoming feel to it. The syllabus, the class textbook, which is Sociology Down-to-Earth Approach by Henslin, and the midterm, the final, and the term paper, which we're going to talk about today, are all tied in together, purposely, intentionally, by me, in terms of course design, so that the midterm that you just all completed was a multiple choice exam, kind of a learn and remember type learning. Not the highest level of learning, but it's a good start. And what we're doing now, since this was multiple choice of sociological terms and concepts, we're now going to, for the term paper, take the answers to these questions that we had on a midterm and then apply them to a term paper, which will be a compact, concise term paper. 3 pages. Well, what I'm looking for is a description first, page 1, of a social group or an individual. And then you can use a book, you can use a play, you can use a music CD, you can use a video CD, you can use actual research, your local high school football team, et cetera, as your reference point for your study. So we'll have a description page. That's basically your journalist questions. The who, what, when, where, and then there'll be a page on analysis. But before we get to that, I just want to show you how this ties in. So for example, the first question on the midterm exam is of the following influences, the one that C. Wright Mills, contemporary sociologist, most attributed to being the one that sociologists would use to explain individual behavior. How do we explain individual behavior from a sociological perspective? The first answer is A, common sense. The second is instinct. The third is external influences. And the fourth is inherited abilities. And the answer is C. Which is what? A little bit louder? External influences. Because external influences really is what sociology is all about. The influences that groups have on us in terms of who we are, what our aspirations are, what we think about when we grow up, et cetera, et cetera. In order to really put this into the broader social context, which is another sociological term, which was on the midterm, let's look at U.S. history just for a brief period, okay? A brief moment or two. If we looked at 1776 as a starting point, a Declaration of Independence from Great Britain, et cetera, and you think about what life must have been like in that socio-historical context, the culture, the material culture, the non-material culture, the way of life was radically different than ours. Radically different. How so? First off, it was primarily before contact, before Europeans landed here. You need to know this. Native Americans, American Indians lived here for thousands of years. Thousands of years. So they obviously adapted to the climate. They were primarily hunter-gatherers. However, recent research has shown that they also was involved with the cultivation of plants, both for medicine and for food. I meant to bring it today, but I forgot, sorry, an arrowhead that was found by my father-in-law, of all people, in a small town called Union Gap, Maryland, which is near the Chesapeake Bay and near fresh water, where the Native Americans wanted to live. Anyway, they had a hunting and gathering society. So when the English settlers came, John Smith, et cetera, they encountered these small hunter-gathering societies and Native Americans, and what they would do is they were nomadic. They moved from place to place. They were small because they just lived off the land. So that's what it must have been like then. Now, if you were in the United States, let's say anywhere from 1776, let's say to 1800, and you were born then, if you were anything other than a white Anglo-Saxon male, the chances were pretty much that you weren't going to college. The chances of you becoming the President of the United States were what? Think back, 1776. Let's say you're a female. Let's say you're black. Let's say you're me, Italian American. what would be the chances of any of us, unless you were wealthy, white Anglo-Saxon, of becoming president of the United States? Zero, right? It wasn't going to happen, right? We had slavery then. Women didn't have any rights to even vote. I mean, it was horrific. However, for the people in that time, that was their social reality. So, you move along and you go to, let's say, 1860, you have the Civil War happening. We abolished slavery after the Civil War. However, still, if you want to become president of the United States, just as an example in ways in terms of the influence of the broader society on us, in terms of what we think about, what we believe, what we do. I mean, think what it must have been like for, let's say, women and black folk and ethnic groups. We know from our sociological research that people were lynched just because of who they were in parts of this country. For example, that after slavery, the agricultural industry down south, how to bring in some people to now pick the cotton, and they brought in Sicilians, and they did the work. So, moving along in time, if we get to what changes society, what makes society change, is the technology. So when the Native Americans encountered the English, they didn't understand this idea of owning property. They didn't know how to plow the earth. So the plowing of the earth allowed agriculture communities to develop, where now you didn't need everybody working to hunt and gather food. Now you only need a smaller population to try to grow the food. So you had other people doing other things. It's considered the dawning of civilization. That's when people started getting into the arts, et cetera, et cetera. Just to give you a brief history. So you move along, and the next invention was the steam engine. For the first time in the history of Earth, we now have machines doing the work that animals did and humans did. So that changed. What did it do? It kicked us out of the farm, so to speak. Most people that worked on the farms were poor. In Italian, it's paisanos, peasants, if you will. And they came to work in the cities. And what did they encounter when they came to work in the cities? Both primarily in Europe and the United States, was factory work where the wages were very low. There wasn't anything called a minimum wage. There wasn't any health benefits. There wasn't any retirement, 401ks. There wasn't holidays. You didn't get time off for your birthday. You called in sick, you got fired. You wanted to join a union, you got fired. You spoke up, you got fired. You worked for minimum wage. They employed children in factory work, 9, 10 hours a day, because the people needed the money to live. So at first, industrialization, although it became more efficient, more effective, led to rationality, created a lot of wealth for some people, not for everybody. Eventually, though, around 1950, things started changing again. For some reason, there was a confluence of events where the society became more technologically advanced, and consumers wanted goods. World War II ended, and what happened at the end of World War II? We had the GI Bill, where for the first time, thousands and thousands of people, common people like me, let's say, were able to go to college because they had the ability to. Take Montgomery College, 1947, 48, I believe is the date. So there wasn't a Montgomery College before then. The universities that existed before then were primarily for the very wealthy. Very few people went. So now, everybody's going to college because we need more engineers. We need more scientists. We need more journalists. We need people to make the machinery, to take care of it, et cetera, et cetera. So technology always changes. So you move on to contemporary society, the microchip, another invention. Changed this again, radically. How so? Well, just think of the internet. The ability to cross continents, across the nation with messages, the ability to work from home. We now live, we call it a post-industrial society. It's more like a knowledge society. The United States was the first society that had more people working in knowledge, information, and services than they did manufacturing. And that's because of technological changes. So, if you were born, let's say, in 1986, or President Obama, let's say, he's 47 years old, not sure of his exact birth date, but the idea things have changed. Now there's hope for anyone that could become president of the United States. So that's a major change. And how does it impact us? Well, if you were looking for a career, which I'm sure you are, it's why you're here in college at some point, manufacturing right now in the United States is at an all-time low. It's like 11.7%, I believe, of the population in the United States is actually working in manufacturing. Everybody else is either doctors, lawyers, teachers, engineers, journalists, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so let's get back to the term paper. Just wanted to give you a brief history. So you see the force of society then. Imagine just for a moment, before we go to the term paper proper, imagine what it must have been like, life must have been like, let's say if you were a Native American and these folks come, these Europeans come, and they just start taking over. They start owning land, et cetera, et cetera. It must have been really scary. Keep in mind, they lived here, we know this, for at least 10,000 years. Okay, so you're going to have a description of your social group, whatever you pick. You choose it, which is interesting in and of itself, because you choose the social group. You give me a description. Okay. The analysis. This is the part where we get into work. You want to do a macro analysis and a micro analysis. Let me look at my notes for a second. In doing this, I want you to apply at least 10 sociological concepts that were on the midterm terms into the term paper. So, and they're listed on the syllabus, which you have. So concepts like society, social structure, the broader social context, social location, culture, these are all assignments that we've already covered in our textbook. And it goes on and on and on. So for example, Stephanie had a question last week about the terms, and she said, Professor, do we have to put only the terms that you listed on the syllabus into term paper? And I said, no, if you have others, that's fine. This is just sort of recommended. However, there are several I would like to say. In terms of your analysis, there's two types of sociological analysis we do. Macro, which is large scale, and the two sociological theories that looks at it are functional, structural functionalism, and conflict theory. They look at the large scale, the macro. So for example, let's take something contemporary. We just had a midterm election in the society, right? That's how we do things in the United States. We vote, and the people speak, and then we elect representatives in the Congress, Senate, and the President of the United States. So we had a midterm election. Now you have a little bit of a change. You have the House of Representatives. The majority now is no longer Democratic, is now Republicans. The Senate is still controlled by the Democratic Party. However, they do have more Republican senators. And the president, of course, is Democratic. So it'll be interesting to see from a conflict perspective, we would say these groups are conflicting with each other, the Republicans and Democrats. That's fairly clear to anyone that watches the news or picks up the newspaper or talks to anybody on the street. So they would say, well, they're conflicting with each other. Other type of conflicts. Let's say the owner of a store, you go out, you want to open up a restaurant. So you open up, let's say, a restaurant here in Maryland, and you want to hire employees. Well, there's a built-in conflict from the conflict perspective. You want to maximize your profits as an entrepreneur, right? You're in business to make money. The employees that you hire, they want to get maximum wages. So you have sort of a conflict there. The functionalist, and that's true in a lot of situations. So you're looking for conflict there between groups. They view society as having scarce resources, et cetera, et cetera. Moving towards the structural functionalist perspective, they're looking at how society is interrelated and how it functions, how it works. So for example, in our society, we have a high division of labor, very specialized. Example, I don't really know where this bottle of water came from. I think it's from New York somewhere, but it's good. Thank you, New York. And it's tasty. It's good water. But did I make it? No, I didn't make this. Do I even know who made this? No. Do I care? No. All I know is when I put the dollar, whatever it costs, into the machine, it comes out, it's cold, and I can give a lecture. So I say thank you. But we're all interdependent upon one another in this type of post-industrial society. So when you go to the supermarket to buy your groceries, 100 years ago, you probably were on the family farm. Now you don't even think of that anymore, right? It's all wrapped up ready to go, you give them your green and you walk out. So we live in a radically different type of society. So when you're looking at the social institutions of society, in our culture, post-industrial society, they're very formal. So we have formal education. In a hunting-gathering society, you learn by watching the elders. That's how you learn. Life was pretty simple. You know, you went to school by doing. And by doing, it turns out, is very healthy in terms of learning. Active learning, which is why I want you to write this term paper, is doing. So I want you to look at whatever problem you're looking at. So let's say you're examining homeless men, you know, the poor. And as I said, as Henslin tells us in the textbook, he was examining homeless, able-bodied men who were in DuPont Circle in Washington, D.C. And he was trying to figure out, well, okay, who are these people, et cetera, et cetera. So using a conflict perspective, you would say, well, these folks are at the bottom rung of the social class system. In other words, they're as low as you can go because they don't have a job, they don't have a home. As able-bodied men, they're not even eligible in this society currently for public assistance, even for 2 years. So opportunities that are available to us are closed to them, probably due to lack of education, probably due to the fact that their skills are not up to speed in terms of providing anything to an employer. Maybe they get an occasional job. From a functionalist perspective, they would say, well, somehow they're dysfunctional. You know, but they do perform a function. So functionalists would say, well, deviance is almost necessary for society, because without deviance, we wouldn't know what's appropriate. So we would say, well, look, this is not us. They're performing dysfunctionally. They're not working, et cetera, et cetera. So we call them out, depending upon the deviant act. I mean, they're not criminals here, which is a special type of deviance. They're just people that don't want to work for whatever reason. From a micro perspective, the symbolic interactionists, they look at society in terms of social interaction, how people create realities. In other words, how do they survive on the street? How do they get along? How do they, if they drink, which in this case they did, in the case of Henslin's group, how do they get the money for the wine? How do they get the money for food? Where do they sleep during the day or at night? How do they take care of themselves? You know, if they're not working. But the social realities, you have to look at all three. You have to look at the conflict perspective, the functionalist perspective, and the micro symbolic interactions perspective. You know, what symbols do they have? What meaning do they give? So for example, here in a classroom, you know, we'll write a term paper, and this for us has symbolic meaning, right? This is not the group that you're studying when you write your term paper. You know, this just is a representation of that. So for us, the computer, the pen, reading are our props, so to speak. For them, it might be, you know, a wine bottle, and if someone disagreed, in our case, we would discuss it. In their case, they might break the bottle, the neck of it, and use it as a weapon. But you have to look at all three. So now, for your conclusion, then I'll get back to this. We'll backtrack, but I just want to go through it quickly, and then we'll discuss a little bit more detail. For your conclusion, what I'm looking for now is for you to examine yourself. So you take something like social location. Social location is what? Is your age, your race, your sex, your income level, and your level of education, let's say. So you have a lot of variables here, right? Your age varies, your income varies, yeah, et cetera. So take a look at the society that you're in. So whatever group you're examining, so for example, Drew is examining the family, what I would suggest is that you take a look at maybe a family from a different culture where the nuclear family is not the standard. So for example, there are some countries, let's say let's say in the African continent, where you could have, a man could have more than one spouse, okay? Whereas here, that's not the case. So what I want you to do is to look at that with a sort of a culturally relativistic eye and say, well, wait a second, I may not agree with that. That's okay. I'm not trying to change what you think, but I'm saying try to understand the reason why someone would do that. Why would a country allow this? What's the rationale behind it? And why do we only want to have two people? You know, usually it's a husband and wife. You know, why is that the case? So you begin to examine yourself. How ethnocentric are you? Do you have the ability to look at yourself and see yourself the way others would from a distant culture, let's say, or from a different age? So if you change one of your variables imaginatively, imagine yourself like older. Would you see it the same way? Imagine yourself if you were born in, let's say, the South American jungle among the Yanomamo tribe there, which is also in our textbook. You know, you wouldn't grow up liking jeans and iPods and Xboxes and thinking hamburgers are delicious and pizza was great, right? You would be a hunter warrior. You'd run around, if you were a male, probably with bows and arrows. Females, you would be gathering stuff, foraging, etc. And you wouldn't be thinking of having a career in some formal institution, right? You'd be looking to survive. So the type of society you live in impacts who we are considerably. So for your conclusion, I want you to do what we would call a critical analysis, where you actually take a look at the fact that you're living in a post-industrial society in the 21st century. By the way, this is the second decade already, right, of the 21st century, so we're in it long enough. And you're from the suburbs of Washington, D.C., so most of you are upper middle class, and you're young, most of you, some of you are older. How is that impacting your view? If you change one of the variables, let's say you happen to be white, if you were black, would you look at it differently? Why? If you were female versus male, think just the idea of growing up female versus male in any culture. Just that one variable alone, you change that and look at how everything changes. Okay, any questions right now? Let's just stop, take a breath. Questions? No questions? Anybody have questions about their term paper so far? So I'm that clear. I must be good. Okay. All right. Well, look. That's good. That's fine. So sociologists, we try to focus on how social groups have shaped and molded our ideas, our desires, so that so it's become who we are is the type of society we live in, and at what point in time. 70 years ago, I probably would have been interested in becoming an engineer and working in manufacturing, or you might have been. Now, the other thing about looking at groups, like I'm not sure, what are some of your topics that you're picking? That's interesting. What groups are you picking? Who has, because it's due next week. So by now, I'm sure you have a group. Tell us your name and tell us what you're studying. Oh, wait, I have a microphone. Here you are.
I'm Kathy, and I picked the military group.
Military group?
Yeah.
Okay, what about the military fascination? You can hold it if you want. Okay.
Because like in the military, there's so many diversity, so I want to pick in that one because have so many different type of groups, people in there, and they still function like really, like together, like.
They have solidarity, cohesiveness, and they definitely ethnocentric. So you're looking at it's almost like a different society, the military, right?
Yep.
I mean, it's different rules. Any veterans here? You're a veteran, right?
Yes.
Any student veterans? Poppy's a veteran back there. So when you enter the military, it's like going into a different society, right? There's a military code of conduct. You go into boot camp, and
they strip your identity.
They strip your identity. And then what do they do after they strip your identity?
They put you into like recruit.
It's a recruit. They give you a new identity. Now you're a recruit. So you're looking at it. So you're out of the military now. So you're looking at it from a little different perspective because now you're a student. One thing that's interesting about veterans in general, I'll make a general statement about veterans, is that they're used to following orders. So I say, do the paper, it's due next week. The probability is you'll have it. And so will Poppy. Good. Okay. Anything else you want to tell us? Okay. Tim, what is your paper on? Tell us why.
I'm doing my paper on high school football.
High school football, okay.
Yeah, and I guess I'm doing it because I experienced that myself, and it's also kind of like another society. I mean,
okay. We would refer to it as a subcultural group, but the interesting thing about football and relationships, which I appreciate you saying that because it made me think, group structure. The structure and size of the group has a lot to do with how the group functions. So for example, if you take the smallest group would be 2 people, right? Let's just say a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, 2 good close friends, okay? That's the most intense emotional relationship you'll ever be in, right? Because you just focus on each other. However, it's also the most unstable Why is that, Allie? Why is a dyad, two people, the most unstable? Because you got two people, right? What happens, Leah? The relationship is over. So while it's intense, over. See you later. Don't call, I'll call you. You know. Yeah, but see, with a football team, you like that? Okay, good. I like it too. Okay, football team, because there's more than two people, it changes the dynamics so that I believe it's 11 people on offense and defense. By the way, Damascus football is doing really well this year. I understand. Good for you. They're second in the metropolitan region this year, just so you know. But if the quarterback goes down or doesn't show up or the lineman doesn't, they just bring in another player. So there it becomes more formal, where every person has a role to play, depending upon the position they occupy. And there are rules. So once you start getting larger, you get more formality. You lose the intimacy of that dyad. You know, you become like the left tackle. What position did you play?
I played
Left guard. Okay. So you played left guard. So you're the left guard. Yeah. So you had a position. So you have to understand the interesting thing, which George Herbert Mead thought of as a social interactionist about team sports, is that it's a higher level of learning, because I used to make fun of jocks, not anymore. It's a higher level of learning when you think about it. He has to know, correct me if I'm wrong, not only your position, guards on offense, right? Okay, so you have to not only but you have to know what everybody else is going to do, depending upon the situation. And usually defense has something to do with that, right? So he has to understand everything. So if this happens, he has to know this is what he has to do. That gets complicated. Okay, all right, who else? You I know it's Leah, right? Leah, tell us your topic.
I'm doing high school cheerleading.
High school what?
Cheerleading.
Cheerleading. Okay, so you and Tim should talk. Did you go to Tim's football? Okay, good. Why are you interested in that? I'm just curious.
It's like the same thing as football. It's like a different group, and like there's different lineups and formations and like stunts and stuff. So I thought.
Yeah, so you can look at it from a macro perspective. It's part of the entertainment industry, particularly sports. Then for the micro, you get into what do these people do when they get together? Well, they have outfits. They announce themselves, right, with costumes. And there's rules, and there's all this pomp and ceremony. Some people like it, some people don't like it, but there's homecoming, et cetera, et cetera. Were you a cheerleader in high school?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, well then good for you. All right, so now you look at it from a perspective that you're no longer the cheerleader. But the structure still goes on, because they got new cheerleaders now. Okay, good. Thank you. Let's see. Young man, tell us what you're doing your term paper on.
I'm doing a term paper on comparing the U.S. to Peru.
Okay, Peru.
Well, and I'm doing this because I was born in Peru, and I moved to the United States when I was 5.
So you lived in Peru until you were 5, okay.
And I just want to get past my ethnocentrism, so I'm doing research and everything.
So you want to get past your ethnocentrism. You brought that up when you came to see me during one of my office hours. So go with that. What do you mean you want to get past your ethnocentrism? It's hard to get past your ethnocentrism. We can practice cultural relativism, but it's really difficult to get rid of your ethnocentrism completely. Some ethnocentrism is good, group solidarity. But tell us what you're thinking about that.
Well, like, when I went back to visit, I experienced culture shock. And
how so?
Because everything's like different there. I'm not used to like seeing like other people like speaking Spanish, I guess. And
was there a lot of middle class? My impressions of Peru, a little bit that I've read, is that you have a wealthy class and a lot of workers, and there's not this middle class like we have in the United States. So it's good. So it says people spoke Spanish. Do you speak Spanish?
Yeah.
Okay, but it still shocked you because here everybody's pretty much speaking English. Yeah, language is probably the most important aspect of culture. There are words, I'm sure. Do they speak Spanish?
Yeah, I speak Spanish.
Okay, so the language. Are there any words in Spanish that don't sort of translate so well into English?
Not really.
Well, you
Maybe
moved
like
here when you were 5,
so,
right?
Yeah.
You moved to the United States when you were 5. So it's interesting because you pretty much grew up here. I can't remember what I did when I was 5. I can't remember what I had for breakfast last week. But so when you say get past your ethnocentrism, what do you mean by that?
Just like look at the world from a different perspective.
What perspective? I'm sorry. Speak up.
Like looking at the world from a different perspective.
Okay.
To
So
understand
just
more culture.
Understanding it. Sure. one of the, I don't need the mic, you hold on. One of the things, for example, during World War II, which is supposed to be the war that ended all wars, by the way. How did that work out? Not so good, humanity. But one of the mistakes the Nazis made, for example, and other cultures have done it too, when one tribe kills another tribe, when they kill somebody because they're a different religion, or in this case, a different race. By the way, we're all the human race. Let's get past that already. Is anybody here not human? Just curious. Okay. The Nazis, they didn't understand the culture. See, by understanding a culture, you begin to appreciate it. So let's take, I don't want to know, let's take Spain. We're talking Spanish. Let's take Spain. So España, you know. In Spain, they have what? They have bullfighting, right? They have the matador and the bull. And the purpose of it is to kill the bull, or the matador, as the case may be, right? We, in this particular culture, because of our love for animals, which has grown increasingly more and more as the days go on, almost to irrational exuberance, by the way, oh my God, it's horrible. But then you ask, how many people here eat meat? How many people here eat meat? Okay, most of us, right? Okay, so, you know, that's part of their culture, their folklore, their romance. You know, we have a Super Bowl or a World Series, so they have bullfighting. You know, I mean, the people there seem to like it. So, you know, once you say, well, that's different because, then you're using your culture's measurement stick to judge that culture. Now, like I said, certain amount of ethnocentrism is important because you need cohesiveness, you need solidarity. But run amok, out of control, it can lead to discrimination, racism, genocide, right? So that's why I keep saying, we're all human. Yeah, that's the only real race. Everything else is sort of manufactured. Okay, good, let's get a couple more. Let's see, who has a topic? Stephanie, you have a topic. Okay, tell us what your topic is.
My term paper is going to be about the difference between upper class and lower class.
In the U.S.?
Yes.
Now, contemporary society or back then?
Back then, and then my conclusion will kind of wrap up like now.
Interesting. So what makes you interested in this? From the, like what era are we talking? Like 1800s, 1900s, 1700s?
1800s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it was a different time then, right? Picture yourself living then. How would your life be different? How would your beliefs be? Let me give you an example. This struck me, and I still can't get past it. In our textbook, and this is not too long ago, 1937, Needsville, Tennessee. Eunice Johns marries this, he's 23. He's allowed to marry, legally, a 9-year-old. This is statutory rape in our society. This to me is almost taboo. In fact, I would say it's taboo. How could you even, I couldn't even consider it on my worst day. A 9-year-old, you know, 23 to 9. But it was okay then. So you wonder why. How did society allow that? How did that social reality? See, if you do not know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. But if you only know your history, you're also doomed to repeat it. So that's why sociological research is important. Because, for example, let's take spouse abuse. You know, most people would say, by the way, sociologists led to the laws that prevent spouse abuse. It's usually a man abusing his wife, female. Not always, but usually. But you would think logically, common sense, everybody knows if someone's abusing somebody, they'll leave. Right? You go away. I mean, I don't want somebody abusing me, right? And some people do leave. That's true. But some people stay in the relationship. So then the question was, why? Why is this happening? Well, if you go back in time, and let's say in the 1940s or 50s, women weren't really in the workforce as they are today, right? Like, for example, my mom was a housewife. So she, like a lot of American women at the time, sort of depended upon her husband for their livelihood, for their economic survival. And they're raising the children, they're cooking and cleaning, et cetera, et cetera. So some women probably put up with abuse because they had to, they were stuck, right? Now we have, it's more complicated. I think there are more, numbers-wise, women in the workforce today than men. So now women have careers, professions, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, we almost got a woman president this time, right? We came close. So, so it's there. You can see it's on the horizon. It's going to happen sooner or later, right? Question is how soon. I didn't expect a black president this soon, to be quite honest. But I knew it was coming because of our society. We're very diverse. So sooner or later it's going to happen. But it was like a shock. We got President Obama. Where did he come from? Chicago. Okay. So, but now women have, so they have options. But it turns out when you do studies, when they did, they interviewed 125 couples who were going through a divorce, and they would try to figure out how many of those men abused their spouse. So when spouse abuse first came out, for example, as a real big issue that women started speaking up about it, loud and clear, in the 60s, they said, well, it was male subculture that causes it. We go, oh, male subculture. Yeah, you're all being too macho or something. So we thought about it for a little bit. We said, well, wait a second. Not all men abuse their spouses. In fact, most do not. But enough do that it's a social problem. So what characteristics, well, back to social location, what characteristics would lead someone to abuse their spouse as opposed to not? Now, the hard part is, let me get the chair for a second. The hard part is you can't predict this like a cause and event. So, for example, the so-called hard sciences, with all due respects to physics, engineering, etc., if I push this chair, it moves. The harder I push it, because it has wheels, the harder it will move, right? Well, with people, that's not always the case. It's much more complicated. You have free will, you react, you might push back. But looking at who's most likely to abuse their spouse, what they found was people who dropped out of high school, men, or barely finished high school, people whose jobs was a constant stress in terms of financial, they don't make a lot of money. Their education was less than their spouse. Their father-in-law made more. And it was always a constant strain, being told what to do all the time at work. So if you picture a 45-year-old, let's say, working as a, maybe in a retail store or at McDonald's somewhere, or any place like that where they're not making a lot of money, they're constantly being told what to do, and their spouse is making more money, and they maybe dropped out of high school. That person, I'm not saying is going to abuse their spouse, because that's not true in every case, but they're more likely to. So what's the answer? How do we stop it, right? I mean, there are two types of sociology. One is just trying to figure out science for the sake of social science, and there's applied sociology. Okay, great, we figured out the problem. How do you fix it? What's the answer? What do you think? You have the microphone back. I'm going to ask somebody to think about this. What is the answer? Critical thinking. What is the answer? What do you think is the answer to spouse abuse? You don't know? Well, you have an idea. Yeah. In other words, how do we stop it? I mean, we want men to stop hitting women or abusing them mentally, right? It's not cool. It's better to be like me, a fun-loving husband. My wife loves me. I love her, by the way. Yes.
Maybe more communication between the couple.
Okay, more communication. I think one variable stands out, but this is my own educated opinion. I haven't done any research on this, but it's clear to me that people who, one variable seems to be more powerful than others. And what do you think I'm thinking of? Say that again. What was that? What?
Education.
Education, yes. Ah, Josh. Yes. Oh, hold that microphone. Josh, he spoke up. My heart beats up. Yeah, you're right. Education. Why? Because the studies show consistently, as your level of education changes, the tendency, not in every case, but that is a strong tendency, the income goes up, and the type of occupation you have becomes more independent. So, for example, we have 10 more minutes, I believe. If I want to spend the next 10 minutes discussing this issue, no one's going to come in and say, hey, professor, you need to move on. It's not going to happen. Okay? That's why I like doing this, because it's creative. I get to use this as opposed to that, working with the hands. So that's the difference. We become creative. We use our mind. We explore. We analyze. We provide needed knowledges. In this case, stimulating young minds to do better. Speaking of which, what is your paper going to be on?
Mine's going to be on criminals.
Criminals. Woohoo! What type of criminals? Well, when you say criminal, what do you think of initially? Tell the truth.
Someone who's violating the law,
Someone's violating
going
law.
against social norms.
Crime. What do you think of?
Well, the definition of crime is going against violating a law in which a state can seek justice.
Okay.
So
But when you
it's
think of crime, what do we tend to think of? We tend to think of what? We think of
murder, rape,
Yeah.
larceny.
Murder,
theft.
rape. We tend to think of street crime. Drugs, pimping, mugging, stealing, robbing, murder. You know. What else? I can't think of anything. You know, serial killers, you know, that type of thing. They're terrible, by the way. We'll discuss them next week. But we tend not to think of white-collar crime, right? Or I would call elite crime from a conflict perspective. White-collar crime, let's say from or professional crime. So, for example, insider stock trading, purposely dumping chemicals into rivers that are killing people, intentional pollution. For example, if you recall, you probably don't recall because it was a while ago, but about 10 years ago, there was an issue with Ford Explorer. The issue's gone, by the way, by now, all due respect to Ford. But there were issues with the tires and the truck and the SUV turning over and killing people. People were dying on the highways because of this. So when you looked into it, you found out that they were recalling these Ford Explorers, Ford company, from other countries, but in the United States they were still selling them, willfully knowing that this was harmful until enough people died and people made noise about it. My only point is, if I intentionally make something that harms, let's say I make baby furniture and I build a crib and it's unsafe and the baby's neck gets caught between the slats, I'm not going to jail, because who am I held accountable to? The Montgomery County Police, with all due respect, Drew, to your dad who's a police officer, he's not going to investigate that, right? Nor has he been trained to or expected to. So I would go in front of the Consumer Product and Safety Commission. Elite crime, my friend. And what would they do? They would give me a fine. You've been a bad boy, fine. They'll smack me in there. So I paid a fine and I continue doing business. Why is that the case? Why do we treat this differently? Why do we even think differently? Think about that when you're doing your paper. Okay. Social class and crime, you know, they have different illegitimate opportunity structures. Look at Madoff. By the way, only in New York do you get a guy named Madoff that makes off with the money. It's a great New York story. Okay, let's see. Let's get one more. Papa. Yeah, you. Tell us your topic and just what you're doing, that's all. First of all, you're a veteran, right?
Yes.
We salute you. Veterans Day's coming up, so.
Yeah, I was thinking about doing veterans.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay. Good for you.
Yeah.
Okay. What, how they're adjusting to college life, or?
Not just that. Like coming back from Iraq.
Coming back from Iraq and Iran.
Exactly. Yes.
I mean, Afghanistan.
Exactly.
Yeah, a lot of them are coming back. What? They're coming back sort of socially, emotionally distraught. The psychologists call it post-traumatic stress disorder. As you know, I did an in-depth case study of a student veteran here at Montgomery College. I'll just use his first name today, although he said I could use both. His name is Brian. I'll see his first name. It was both names because he said it was okay. Smith. So he came back from Iraq, and he experienced what I would would call as a sociologist culture shock. Because when you go to a foreign country, particularly during the time of war, you're shocked, A, by the culture, as you are when you go to Peru, but then the shock was the blast. His truck just missed an IED. The IED went off, loud bomb, and it shocked him to his system. Now you understand, this person was, he was what they call a military brat. His father made a career in the military. He planned on making a career in the military. His wife was in the military. He was in for 6 years. But that shock to his system from the blast, think of a loud, loud thunderclap that comes close to the house, and thinking about that happening on a regular basis, every time you go down a road, just think of the anticipation of having to fear that. When he came home, you know, you're discharged one day, you report to physical training one day, next day you're a veteran. The transition's tough, right? It's not so easy for some guys or women that experience war. War, and he thought there was something for him. I said, you know, there is something that's disturbing you, that's clear. I says, but I want you to think about this. War is the thing that's abnormal. That's why you're disturbed. It's not normal to bomb somebody, to kill somebody intentionally, right? So that's the abnormal social structure. Your reaction is a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. So, you know, college life is serene for the most part. Till you come to our class, we get into a lot of debates. But, you know, pretty much smooth. You don't have to worry about it. So it took him 2 years before he'd see trash on the street and think it might be a bomb. What's helped is this new GI Bill, post 9/11. It's very nice financially, and hopefully it'll help. There's a great PBS special out called The Wounded Platoon. I think I showed you a little bit of it. We'll show some more. What's interesting like that, because it's a platoon, it's a larger group, it becomes sociological. So what I'd like you to leave with it, whatever you're studying in your term paper, give me a good description. You know, make believe I don't know anything about the topic, which in some cases that'll be very true. So the what, the where, the type of society it's in. And when you think about societal change, think about technology, because that's what causes the change. The technology, I like to think of as the technique of knowledge. That's technology, okay, the technique of knowledge. So you look at the type of society, how it has consequences for the beliefs, the aspirations, et cetera, of the individuals. So for example, you have the GI Bill now that you're using? Yes. If you didn't have the GI Bill, would you be here? Probably not. Where would you be? You're not sure? Walmart. Well, I want you to think about that when you're doing your paper. You know, you'd be at Walmart. So the GI Bills is a wonderful thing in terms of allowing people from working class families like I came from. That's what I used the GI Bill. So the Navy to allow me to go to college. You know, so it's a wonderful thing. So your conclusion, again, take a look at the structure of the society, the social institutions. How does the government, is it a formal government like ours? Is it formal education like we have? What type of economy do they have? How do they distribute the goods and services to the population? We live primarily like in a consumer-oriented society, although the new term of art is prosumers. You know, in the old days, you go to the bank and speak to a person, and they'd help you with stuff. Now you go to an ATM. Wait a minute, I'm doing their work now. How come I'm not getting paid? You know what I mean? We're doing their jobs. All right, I want to leave you with one more idea to hopefully this will crystallize the value of social science and particular sociology. You know, if you look at divorce is a serious problem in our culture, right? There's a lot of divorce, a high rate of divorce. So if you were going to analyze it, I think 1 out of 2 marriages that ultimately dissolve, but then people get remarried. So we still believe in marriage, just that it doesn't last a lifetime anymore for many people. You look at, well, why is that the case? Well, from the symbolic interactionist perspective, you know, the micro-sociology, how people give meaning in symbols, you know, in the 1930s, all of a sudden, the love symbol, the personality of the partner, became an issue. You know, heretofore was like, well, wait a second, do you have good teeth? Yeah, okay, I have good teeth. It's a socioeconomic thing, we're going to get married. You know, this personality and love that you had to be, you know, romantically and emotionally involved, and they have to satisfy your emotional needs, that's a very modern society issue. You know, I think if you know, for those of you who take psychology, you get into Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's a higher level than food, safety, and, you know, shelter. Now you get into a higher level. So they would say, well, that changed. The meaning of marriage used to be in the 1940s or 30s, if you got divorced, it was considered an immoral act. You were supposed to stick it out for better or for worse. And if you didn't, you were considered a deviant to the nth degree. You wouldn't get hired, let's say, at a job. Well, that's not the case anymore. Now it's like seen as, oh, you have freedom and a new beginning. Where's the party? From a functionalist perspective, they look at it from a broader context. They'd say, well, you know, we used to work together on the farm. You know, now you go out, you earn a living, you do this, you do that. The laws have changed where it's easier to get a divorce in the United States. So, for example, state of Maryland, if you're separated for 2 years, you can get a divorce for any reason. You know, the reason I think they give the lawyers the term of art is, you know, they sort of grew apart. Now, I'm waiting for the day, which I think is not too far away, by the way, kind of be like a drive-through to get a divorce. You know, you go to McDonald's, you put the order in, you know, like the divorce, okay, put your numbers in. By the time you come out, here it is, okay. Probably happened in Vegas. That's probably where they'll do it, Las Vegas, just so you know. But so the laws have changed. It's easier. So, for example, if you look at a country like India, they have prearranged marriages and they have a low rate of divorce. I thought, well, what are they doing right? It turns out it's very difficult to get a divorce in India, particularly if you're a woman. So from a conflict perspective, you know, if you go back to the 50s, like I said, when most women were housewives, now they're professionals, they have options. So the problem now is, like, how do you work it out? Somebody still, unless you have people coming in to do your cleaning and cooking and all that, then you have to work out who does the household chores. So in my house, fortunately, my father liked to cook, I like to cook. I keep my wife happy that way. That's how it works. See? She comes home, dinner's ready. I'm happy, she's happy, we're happy. So, you know, however you work it out, but it has to be worked out. Some men see it, well, it's beneath them. You know, they just want to watch ESPN or something, or HBO. Yeah, you're going to have to help out if you're going to let it work, if both of you are working full time. Okay, so any other questions? We're getting ready to wrap this up. It went a lot faster. I have a lot more material, obviously. What I would say is use your references for your bibliography page. Use the textbook. All you need is your source material, in your case, veterans, GI Bill, in your case, your cheerleading, all that stuff about the school, and then you use this book. Use the same format for your bibliography page. So you reference it, and you'll notice when Henselin does it, if you're paraphrasing or quoting from someone, put the person's name in the body of the paper, react to why that interests you, and at the end you list the title of the author's full name, the title of the book, and where it's located, you know, the publisher. So that's it. That's it. Have a great day. We'll see you on Thursday, and we'll continue our chapter on deviance and social control. Thank you, Montgomery College TV. Okay.